Now in this lecture, let's try to understand the fourth grant type inside OAuth2 flow, which is client credentials grant type. So before diving into the details, I want to give a scenario where we will use client's grant type. So think of a scenario where you don't have any UI application, where you don't have any resource owner or user involved. You have multiple backend applications which they share data between them, like in the scenarios of microservices, where hundreds of applications trying to interact with each other and share some secured information between them. So in such scenarios, you decided instead of maintaining the authentication and authorization flow inside each and every application, you decided to keep that all the authorization logic and authentication logic in a separate server called auth server, and every application, before it try to communicate with the other application inside your organization, they have to prove their identity and get an access token from the auth server, which will be eventually shared to the other application to get the resources from it. So in such scenarios, we will use client credentials grant type as the name indicates, and you can also see there is no involvement of resource owner or user in this auth flow. As you can expect, this is the flow that will happen inside the client credentials grant type. In the very first step, client will directly call the auth server. When I say client, it's one of the backend application. Make a request to the auth server to get the access token by passing the client credentials, like its own client ID and client credentials, which it received initially when it registered with the auth server. And since there are no user involvement here, there won't be any user credentials will be shared. In the second step, where auth server validate the client credentials and give a access token to access the protected resources. Now in the third step, the client will make a request to other application where it trying to get some protected resource by passing the token it received from the auth server. And at last, the resource server or other backend application will validate this token by connecting to the auth server and eventually provided the resources that client is requesting. Based upon our discussion, in the step 1 where the client is making a request to auth server to get an access token, it has to send the following 3 values in the request. One is the client ID and secret to prove its identity to the auth server, like I belongs to so and so organization and these are my client credentials and client ID. Next is scope, similar to authorities, the level of access that client is requesting, like read, write. And the last one is a grant type. Here the difference is we will send the value as client underscore credentials to indicate auth server that there is no user involved and we want to use the client credentials grant type to generate the access token. And you can easily expect this is the most simplest grant type flow in OAuth2 because we avoided one of the component which is resource owner or user inside this flow. We use this authentication flow of client grant type only in the scenarios there is no user and UI involved and where multiple backend applications they are trying to share data between them by using the backend APIs like REST calls. I hope it makes sense to you. Let's try to discuss the last grant type that we have in the next lecture. Thank you and bye.